Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So I started this Pursuit of Truth yesterday with was it Richard Fulton, I think it was his name, talking about the legitimacy or illegitimacy of Israel's preemptive strike on Iran, which I thought was interesting because he talked about the three different steps that you need to take, which he believed he hadn't seen evidence of that. But the problem is, I guess, countries don't share evidence with us. So they may have seen evidence, they're not going to share it with us. It would be great if they did. Well, probably being like a 200-page document that no one would read. But at least a journalist would be able to read it and say, look, here's the evidence. But I guess because we're human, evidence could be fabricated like it was in the lead up to the Iraq-Afghanistan war with weapons of mass destruction, all that kind of stuff. But at least it would be something. But so they may have seen that in their defence, I don't know, but he's talking about that. So he was believing that it was an illegal war because it didn't meet those, it didn't exhaust democracy, and there wasn't an imminent threat. Now, this has been debated. You'll hear later in this bit, and it was in the last Pursuit of Truth about, well, actually, before I get to that, the reason then is today is that the US have now struck Iran, entering into it. And of course, if Israel have gone into this war legally and then have brought America in, then they possibly may have broken the law. But of course, the thing is these kind of laws and charters only seem to exist for the countries that the people who wrote it don't like. Like if it was Russia and China or North Korea doing this, they'd all be up in arms, condemning and, dragging them to The Hague. Actually, I think only one person's been dragged to The Hague, haven't they? Or I don't know, but they'd be calling them all sorts of things. But when it's the friendly, the Western countries, then it doesn't seem to have the same effect. So anyway, yeah, good to go back to, was it Richard Fulton or Dalton? Yeah, he was talking about, because she asked him about the death to Israel, death to the USA, and that kind of imminent danger and the nuclear weapons. And then he was talking about the idea of rhetoric versus action, which I guess we're being seen borne out because we see a lot of rhetoric from Iran. I mean, I don't know how many years have they been saying death to US, death to Israel, and how much have they actually done in the progress of that, if that's their intention. And by the way, just to make it clear, I'm not in defense of any of these. In my world, in my mind, I'd like no one to fight each other. I'd like us all to live together as human beings. There to be no one to have nuclear weapons, no one to have weapons at all, and us not need them, I guess. But in the system that we live within, I'd like only the people who are not going to use them to have them. Well, I'd like no one to have nuclear weapons, full stop, because that's just I guess, I know people use it as a deterrent, and that's the problem, because most countries use it as a deterrent. That allows everyone to say, well, I need it now because I need it as a deterrent. But the problem is that risk of using it, like when the only country in the world has ever used it so far, the United States, in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. That's right, yeah. That when they used the nuclear bomb there, the devastation that it did and the long-term health effects that it caused. And of course, that was just an A-bomb. It wouldn't be as powerful as the nuclear bombs now, what it could do, and the devastation for us all. And as, fellow human beings. Because the problem is that the people who are going to get killed, a majority of them are going to be the normal civilians, like I assume in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not the leaders that are probably in their bunkers or miles away, or the generals and the soldiers, the people who like to or choose to kill. That's the problem. So, yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting from an outside perspective to watch this, but it just seems like when you listen to, and I've got it, the whole of Donald Trump's speech, and there's a bit of Netanyahu's who is so gleeful in his praise for how great Donald Trump is, because that's how you work Donald Trump, isn't it? As long as you make him feel like he's great and it's his idea, he's that kind of person, and and that oh, Donald, can you help us out? Because only you can. Then that's exactly how Netanyahu comes across in his speech. And Donald is like, how brilliant this was. And, he's talking about peace whilst threatening. It doesn't look like he has the concept of what peace is. Like, it's take peace or else I'm going to, we might target more. I don't know. Maybe in the world we live in, that's the only way to get peace, I guess. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, we've seen during countless wars that you have to have wars before you get to peace. Such a shame. If only human beings could be more humane. So what else did I... So most of it is today's stuff. So one of them was, I think, from yesterday, and then the rest is all today's stuff, and them analysing, what happened. And I think there was Alistair Bunkle being interviewed, and Yalda, is it Hakeem? And them talking about, and also Iran's response. But it seems to be, because I've seen Iran and they're sort of talking about that America have gone against the UN Charter and international law and this, that, and the other. And they come across as very like, so I saw a speech I didn't put on this one where he's talking very much like, it seems like someone you could trust. This is the problem with all these world leaders. They're great orators. But the fact is that, wait a minute, you're talking about America. And I mean, not like, I don't like wars, and I don't know whether it's legitimate or not. It doesn't look like it from what the evidence we've been shown as citizens. But unfortunately, we're not always privy to all the information, so I don't know. But even from America's own intelligence, which Trump's decided to go against, they seem to suggest that, yes, they did have nuclear stuff. I mean, it seems to be a bit debatable about the IEA, who the people who, I mean, I assume Iran didn't need to, if they wanted to just make it, they didn't need to tell the IEA to come and check it. It's an international body, isn't it? But they seem to think that they had, well, different people say different things. Some of them say, yes, they did have nuclear stuff. Some of them say they have, that it was weapons grade, getting to that level, which of course you wouldn't need for normal energy, which is the other reason for having nuclear, is not only for making bombs, for peaceful means. And what the threat was. But it doesn't, like, to look at what's going on, Iran don't seem to be in any position, well, they don't seem to be able to defend themselves. If you look at, like, the air superiority was taken by Israel very, very quickly. I mean, it looks very much like Israel, and obviously we know America, have, substantive defences and offences. Whereas it looks like Iran have very little, They have these ballistic missiles and drones, but they're not doing the same damage. Obviously, I know Israel's got the Iron Dome and stuff like that, but it looks like that. The guy that you're first going to hear is very much about rhetoric. Iran talked this big story like we're going to, do this, that, and the other, like one of these, like on the TV shows where you see these big dictators that have all this big words but have no action for it. So that's what it seemed like. I don't know. Well, we haven't seen yet what Iran's response is going to be. Maybe it's going to be it doesn't look like their missiles could reach America, so they can't even attack them back. The nearest they can get is the American bases around the Middle East. But definitely it doesn't seem like Europe's calling for de-escalation, and America are definitely not de-escalating, striking with those massive bombs is not de-escalation. Joining in to a war that some people are questioning whether it is legal in the first place is certainly adding fuel to the fire, as it were. And of course, if now Iran responds in that way, then it's going to, keep going that way. And then it's making peace or negotiation more difficult. But it's interesting how because Iran are calling on other UN members to, condemn this action, this aggressive action, because it's against the Charter or international law. But like as always, it depends how you read it. It's convenient. I think I was going to talk about this before, how Iran will talk about that. But wait a minute, aren't they, and I assume this is true, that based on the knowledge that the media gives out, that Iran have openly been funding Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis militarily, with weapons, with funds, knowing what they're going to do with them. It's not like, where, we know all countries, Russia, America, UK, they all sell weapons to all other different people. But usually they only sell weapons to the ones that they believe won't use it. Although this is in question when it comes to Israel currently, isn't it? Due to what's going on in Gaza. But they sell them to people they trust. That seems like a silly idea from the start, harming your future enemy, or making weapons in the first place from a human perspective. So everyone does that. But obviously, if you're like, it's difficult to sort of stand up there, which they do. And they look, like if you didn't know anything, you'd say, well, yeah, look, he's talking about why is the US being so aggressive? Why are they breaking international law and all these things? And yeah, it looks like that. But wait a minute, are you then also being very hypocritical that you're accusing them of doing something whilst you're quite happy to fund organisations deemed by most as terrorists, and even if not deemed by you as terrorists, Iran, maybe they seem as freedom fighters, I don't know, but they know that they're going to go in and, like with October the 7th, you funded for that, where people were taken hostage. Is that not against international law? Is that not against the UN Charter? Going into someone else's country and being aggressive, is that not against the UN Charter and international law? And yet you're funding that, knowing quite well that is the kind of things they're going to do. And all the other atrocities that are committed by terrorist organisations. To be honest, there's a very fine line, it seems, between military from government and terrorists. At the end of the day, they have different ideologies, but the end result is the same, isn't it? They're both killing people. It's just, I suppose, from military, it should only ever be defensive, whereas with terrorists, it tends to always be offensive. But that's a different argument. What I'm trying to say is that this Iranian is talking about America not following international law and international UN Charter and etc., whereas I'm sure that America could turn around quite easily and say, well, wait a minute, you're funding Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthis, and look what they're doing in the shipping things, or look what they're doing in Gaza. Look at the Israelis, they just go stand and they blow up, or they go and kidnap or shoot or murder or rape. All these things that people with guns seem to will sometimes do, like we've seen in different conflicts, unfortunately still. So it's a bit rich, sort of hiding behind, well, yeah, we were negotiating. And you and Israel and America blew it up by, giving in and just trying to destroy their nuclear capability. Which, the question is, it'd be nice from a journalistic point of view to have the IEA interviewed and ask them, wait a minute, what grade was it? Was there a reason why it should be that grade? Otherwise, wait a minute, if it's more than power, which everyone seems to suggest, well then, why did they have that? But then, like some have said, the reason they may have had it is for a deterrent, to sort of say, wait a minute, we've got this, and that means now you have to take us seriously and you can't invade us because we may use this against you. Because that's why most people have nuclear weapons, is as a deterrent. That's what the West has taught the rest. That if you have a nuclear weapon, then you can't be touched. It's like nowadays, we only see these proxy wars between Russia and America. Usually one side, like Iran is a friend of Russia. yeah, and probably China and North Korea, and Israel is friends with America and UK and Europe. These like proxy wars is basically America and Russia and maybe China like influencing these other ones because they can't do it themselves because they're all nuclear powers and they won't attack a nuclear country because of, well, that could be very dangerous if anyone ever did use it. Not that I don't think anyone would, but they may be pushed to if they're losing and there's no other choice, which I guess is another reason why we should be de-escalating, because what if Iran are very close? What if this secret base that everyone seems to know about was there as cover and they have another one and they're preparing these nuclear warheads and now they feel like, well, we're a laughingstock now. We're losing and there's nothing else we can do. So we might as well just launch a bomb. And the only places that they would be close to is obviously Israel and the American bases. And then who is it who's going to suffer from that? The normal civilians who probably just want peace, who just want to live in harmony with each other, who don't care about this, because at the end of the day, we only live here once and we can't take the land with us. Why can't we just share everything that we found here so freely with each other? But yeah, it just comes across as it comes across very rich from all of them, because all these world leaders are all very hypocritical. They all pick, the bits that they want to follow. And obviously the big boys like America and Russia, they do whatever they like because they have so much power. Who's going to stop against them? You see like Europe, especially UK, cowering behind Donald Trump, sort of giving him like, yes, you're helping out get rid of Iran's, have they even seen the intelligence? Does the UK even have intelligence itself of what grade it is, whether, yes, it looks like they definitely were enriching it, but they didn't have the capability of doing anything with it, like creating the actual nuclear warhead and all that kind of stuff. Some say they don't have a plan to do that. I don't know whether that's, where the evidence for that is either. There seems to be a lot of accusations from everyone, but not very much evidence. But I guess the problem is we're just sitting here watching a box and they're not obliged to give us that evidence because we don't have to make that decision. We can only hope and trust that those in the positions of power aren't A, being misled, and B, are actually, wanting to see proper evidence before going into these things, which of course they may not. If you're the most powerful country in the world, well, you can do whatever you like. Donald Trump's been threatening Iran for 60 plus days. Who's going to stop him? Even if he got someone to give him a piece of paper that, yeah, they're going to do this. Okay, fine, I'm going to do it then. I've marked that, now I can do it. I suppose at the end of the day, if they were going to make a nuclear bomb, I don't want anyone else to have nuclear bombs. It's bad enough that all the countries that have them still have them, and they don't want to get rid of them. Despite in the 80s, they signed agreements, America and Russia, to get rid of them, I thought that was the whole point of that. That would be, ideal. Let's all get rid of nuclear. But the problem is now once someone knows about it, even if you, like with Iran, even if you destroy that base, if they've got the scientists that know how to do it and they have the money, well, they can do it again. Just in another, it's only three things. You need the knowledge, you need the material, you need the money. And then you can do whatever. It's like an ideology. You can't really get rid of that. And in between, normal civilians are getting killed and we're getting distracted by what we should all be thinking about, because we are all distracted by constant wars, constant conflicts, whatever they are, whether it's a sister dying, whether it's, wars, whether it's politics. Even some people are distracted by TV programs or football clubs. We're passing away our time and not actually sorting out our core issue, which is we're all human beings and we only have one existence. Everything that we've here was free once. We put price tags on it. We cut it up and possessed it because that was the way we were back then. But we're not the same now. We don't have to be the same now. I know I'm coming back to the same thing I always do. We need to realize that we're all human beings. We need to share it and make better this experience in this place for everyone, for our future generations. That's why we're called humanity, isn't it? Anyway, here's the Sky News. I'm sure there's going to be more because I'm sure Iran are going to come back. And yeah, take care, Daisy. God bless and peace.
Joining me now is Sir Richard Dalton, former British ambassador to Iran. Sir Richard, good to speak to you this morning. Before we get into where we go from here, I'd like to start almost at the beginning by asking you, was Israel justified in attacking Iran in the first place?
That turns on the international legal considerations for a preemptive attack. And in my view, we've not yet seen any evidence that there was an imminent threat, or that there was a real threat, or that diplomacy had been exhausted. Now, all three should be satisfied to justify the requirements for a preemptive attack. So I'm with those states who say that this was indeed an illegal aggression.
60% enriched uranium. What do you think Iran was legitimately planning to do with that? And they had said that they intended to wipe Israel off the face of the map.
You need to distinguish between rhetoric and capability. Iran had no plan. It had no military endeavor underway to eliminate the state of Israel. It used its support for armed groups to try and affect the outcomes of conflicts which were vital to its national interests, as it saw them, as all the other states in the region do, whether it's Turkey, the United States, or Israel. What is different is the pernicious and highly damaging refusal of Iran to accept the existence of the state of Israel within its 1948 internationally recognized borders. And that indeed has served the Iranian people ill. 60% enriched uranium was accumulated in order to increase the diplomatic pressure on the states concerned about Iran's nuclear program to come back to the negotiating table after the disastrous and highly risky, foolish United States destruction of the previous Iranian international community nuclear deal, which was working, which Iran was respecting, and which provided the assurance that everybody needed, particularly Israel, that military uses for Iran's nuclear technologies would be beyond Iran's reach.
So is the logical extension of what you're saying is that Iran is entitled to develop a nuclear weapon? I mean, 60% takes it well beyond any other kind of use, doesn't it? As diplomatic leverage, effectively.
No, I didn't say that. What I believe is that hitherto, before Israel attacked it, Iran was sticking to its policy not to develop weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons. And that is confirmed by the very latest statement by Tulsi Gabbard, the head of all the United States nuclear agencies, intelligence agencies, who made a very carefully nuanced statement that, okay, Iran could be able to develop a nuclear weapon within weeks or months. NB, she added months, not just Trump's weeks. If, and that's the crucial word, if Iran decided to put together the components that might exist in Iran to go towards making a nuclear weapon and its delivery system. So she has not resiled from the March US national intelligence estimate that Iran has not taken a decision to develop nuclear weapons.
So, given your view on what this means for international law and where Israel may be in breach of that, what are the implications for the United States in getting involved, firstly?
Well, the United States shares with Israel this view that international law doesn't apply to it, and that it can do what it wants with the power that it wants in accordance with its own interpretation of its interests and Israel's interests, which of course is profoundly damaging for the rest of us, even though we have an important alliance with the United States for European security. But what I think we're facing now is the narrowing of the window for diplomacy, because Iran is unwilling to negotiate while it is under attack, and the United States is not going to call off Israel's attack in order to facilitate negotiations. The Europeans have been used simply as message carriers. There appears to be no scope as yet for them to develop the actual policies and mechanisms under international supervision which could re-establish the control and limitation of Iran's nuclear program, which is so essential, and which, together with Israel's nuclear deterrence and Israel and the United States' vast conventional military superiority, provides total deterrence against Iran mounting any sort of major attack.
Where does all of this, Sir Richard, think put the UK's position? I mean, is it conceivable that the UK would allow some US fighter jets, for example, to use its base in Cyprus, should the US decide to go down that route?
It's conceivable, but that would simply be a political gesture. It's not militarily necessary in any shape or form for the United States, which has military bases of its own ringing Iran and has its own nuclear weapons available should it wish to use them, as well as the unassailable conventional military superiority that it has. And I think it would be unwise of Britain to make any such political gesture. It would be against our interests. And nobody could argue that a small British contribution is somehow essential to the final defeat of Iran, if that should be the British objective.
Okay. Sir Richard Dalton, always great to have you on the programme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Here we go again.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Our breaking news this morning. President Donald Trump orders strikes on 3 nuclear sites inside Iran and follows up with a warning to Tehran.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
B-2 bombers dropped 6 bunker busters on those facilities as Israel's Netanyahu hails Donald Trump's intervention.
His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
So 2 people who preemptive.
Iran responds destruction in parts of Israel after a barrage of missiles from Tehran and a demand for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Good morning and welcome to our special programming live from Jerusalem. And we start with breaking news. The United States has launched strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. After days of uncertainty, President Donald Trump made his decision after a late-night return to the White House and the Situation Room. This morning, Iran launched its response, a series of missiles directed towards Israel. More on that in just a moment, but first, Mark Stone reports on that overnight operation.
As the president returned to Washington late on Saturday, the face and the swagger were maybe a hint of what was to come. He was back, we had been told, just for a security briefing in the Situation Room. But these images instead captured the most decisive critical decision of his presidency so far. With his top team around him, he had ordered a strike on Iran's nuclear sites. Within a few hours, he was addressing the nation and the world beyond.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
We know now that a number of B-2 stealth bombers dropped numerous bunker-busting bombs on the Fordo nuclear site. It's located to the southwest of Tehran, and it's believed to be the country's main nuclear enrichment location. It lies deep underground, beneath a mountain. Navy submarines also fired 30 cruise missiles at other sites. It is not independently clear yet how successful the strikes were. But look at these, taken yesterday by Maxar Technologies. They show what's described as unusual truck activity at Fordo, 16 cargo trucks at the entrance to the site. So did the Iranians manage to move equipment before the strikes? It was only on Friday that the president was talking about a 2-week chance for diplomacy.
Does Iran have 2 weeks, or could you strike before that? Are you essentially giving them a 2-week timeline?
I'm giving them a period of time. We're going to see what that period of time is, but I'm giving them a period of time, and I would say 2 weeks would be the maximum.
Apparently waited for the
The talks in Geneva with the Iranians were not a success, and his position changed.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
The threat there is clear, that the hardest bit has now happened, and that if he is pushed, he will go after the Iranian leadership. His judgment, it seems, is that one night of decisive, game-changing airstrikes will end Iran's nuclear program for good, but also force the Iranian government finally to de-escalate. It is a huge gamble.
The Iranians have to
In Jerusalem, the Israeli Prime Minister was framing this decision as a new dawn.
His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
The jeopardy is now huge. The president is gambling that Iran will not have the capability or the guts to hit any of the many US bases in the region. The worst case scenario is that they do. If Americans are killed, this will spiral fast. And on Iranian state TV, the threats were quick and direct.
We were negotiating with the Americans when we were attacked. You made this choice. You started this. The 40 to 50,000 American soldiers in the region are now legitimate targets.
After days of ambiguity, a president now decisive. Where next? It is impossible to tell. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
We see the president now.
The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raising-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
Language of totally destroyed this facility and that facility, and the Iranian officials and state TV have been saying the complete opposite, mild damage. I mean, the truth is that it's only really been light for an hour or two, and that kind of assessment will take a little bit of time. So we'll see what it is when that comes out. What happens now? Well, I mean, the Iranians have responded to Israel, but they will need to work out what their response is to the United States. And there are no good choices for the Iranian regime. If they go at it hard against the Americans, they clearly risk bringing the Americans into this war in a bigger way. And I think that would only result in a defeat for the Islamic Republic. The other option, of course, is a sort of a muted response to this, but that in turn will just demonstrate weakness internally. I mean, if you're in Iran right now, your regime has spent hundreds of billions of dollars over decades building up this nuclear capability. As a result, the entire country has suffered massive economic sanctions, which has had an impact on the financial lives of everybody. You were told that this was for the country's defense and for civil nuclear power. And now that lies in ruins. The shield, Hezbollah, Hamas, Assad, Syria, for example, the Shia crescent that was supposed to defend Iran, to be a deterrent against Israel, is in total tatters. I mean, it's significant that Hezbollah has not got involved in this war. And so the moment that the fighting stops, whoever instigates that is potentially the most risky moment for the Iranian regime. Iranians are not going to go out on the streets and protest against the regime right now, not least because most of the cities are under fairly heavy bombardment from the Israelis. So it's very, very dangerous. And also there is an element of, even if you don't like the regime, you do sort of rally around the country at a time of war. We're seeing the same here. In a very divided country, right now is united. But the moment the fighting stops and the missiles stop coming in, that is a really risky moment for the supreme leader. And he will need to make sure that whatever actions he takes strengthens his position ahead of that moment.
Yeah, and Ali, you just pointed to where Iran is now, especially when it comes to its proxies, and why Israeli officials are saying, actually, whether or not you like Benjamin Netanyahu or not, this moment strategically was the right moment.
Strategically is a crucial word. At the moment, Israel and the United States are having tactical victories. Israel's been taking out ballistic missile launch sites, stockpiles, damaging its nuclear plants, taking out key officials. America has done what it did last night. These are tactical victories. Strategically, where does this go? Where is Iran in 6 months' time, a year's time, 2 years' time? There is a real risk of deep implosion. I mean, regimes change to some people in Iran might sound like a nice outcome, but regime change without a plan in a country that has, really been ruled. I mean, they call Ayatollah Khamenei the world's longest serving dictator. That could be a very, very dangerous time. And then the spill out, Iraq, the Shia militia there. What if they decide to take matters into their own hands? So at the moment we're seeing tactical victories, but what is the big strategic vision for this?
Yeah, and just talking to Israeli officials, they've said to me one of the reasons why perhaps Donald Trump was erring on the side of caution all week is because the big question that he might have been asking his teams was, what does the day after look like? Not what does it look like in a year's time, but what does it look like the day after, perhaps the week after, because he doesn't want to see the United States dragged in to a wider conflict in the Middle East.
He wants to see pictures of, Fordow, Esfahan, Natanz nuclear sites smouldering this morning, and he wants to see the Iranian regime cowed and backing off. And that for him will have been a short, sharp, swift blow, and he can come in and say it was because of his decisive action and the US military that kind of killed this all off. I think that's pretty unlikely to happen, and that is why the risk, therefore, the Americans being dragged into something longer, which Donald Trump won't want, is a very, very great risk indeed. And Iran has multiple ways that it could respond. Attacking Israel, as we've seen, is one, but and they've done it with some success, but limited comparative to the amount of missiles they've fired. If they attack US military bases, well, if you've started getting coffins arriving back in America from US military personnel killed by the Iranians, that puts Donald Trump in a very difficult situation domestically and in terms of his foreign policy. They could look to take action around the Strait of Hormuz. They could attack shipping. That would have a massive global impact, which might sort of rally the wider world to sort of urge de-escalation. There's a lot on the table, and the Supreme Leader will have voices in his ear, particularly in the Revolutionary Guard, sort of saying fight, 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 and he'll have others saying, you're not going to win this fight. Let's do the minimum we need to do. Let's ensure survivability and, effectively live to fight another day.
Yeah, absolutely, where we are following all the developments. Ali, for now, thank you for keeping us up to date. I'm just going to bring in our political correspondent, Amanda Ackast. And Amanda, the world is starting to wake up to this news that the United States did, in fact, launch these series of attacks on nuclear sites and facilities of Iran. But just the update you have there from Westminster.
Yes, indeed. So we understand here at Sky News this morning that the UK was not involved in any way in these US strikes on Iran, which would mean that no UK military assets or indeed military bases have been involved. There was clearly a great deal of speculation that the US might be asking the British government for permission to make use of the base at Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands, which of course has been the centre of so much controversy in recent months. And the US would have to ask the UK permission to use that base if they wish to use it to help launch these attacks. That seems not to have been the case. We know the bombers were heading to Guam, the US base there. But clearly it's unclear as to how much forewarning the UK government had in advance of all of this. David Lammy, of course, has been the Foreign Secretary, was engaged in a very intensive bout of diplomacy in recent days. The UK government's message again and again has been calling for de-escalation, for a diplomatic solution, with Mr. Lammy travelling from Washington to Geneva for talks with his Iranian, French and German counterparts, calling for some kind of deal to halt the Iranian nuclear program and prevent these military strikes. Just yesterday afternoon, he was talking about the fact that there was a window of diplomacy, an off-ramp for Iran with this Donald Trump's talk of a 2-week window, which clearly, if the UK government did know that this was happening, is thrown into a very different light this morning. But clearly we haven't had any formal response yet from the British government, British military or the Foreign Office, but we do understand that the position is that the UK had no involvement with the American action on Iran.
Okay, Amanda, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. I'm just going to bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who is here with me now. And Ali, we were talking about regionally what may happen, what the Iranians might do, what DC is currently thinking. For Benjamin Netanyahu, this has also been a massive gamble and roll of the dice. He wasn't entirely sure that the United States would stand with him. You know, they have an idea of how much support they might get in an operation like this. But he launched that surprise attack last Friday and then continued to urge Donald Trump to join in and take out Fordow, because for the Israelis, that was one thing that they really needed the United States to do to be able to finish those nuclear sites once and for all.
Yeah, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu's had that dice in his hand for 30 years and been waiting to roll it, and he rolled it last week, and he sees it as a truly historic moment, not in just in his lifetime, but in the history of the state of Israel, and an opportunity to change the face of the Middle East for good, for once and for all, and for the better for Israel. And, you know, many people support him in that, and despite statements urging de-escalation or even condemnation of Israel that we've seen from countries around the region, don't necessarily assume that is what they're thinking in private. The Iranians don't have many friends around the Middle East. Countries in the Middle East are deeply worried about the risk of escalation for their own sort of, you know, personal, individual kind of reasons, whether it's the UAE, for example, which lies just across the water from Iran, whether it's Saudi Arabia, which has found itself in recent years engaged in a war in Yemen, which was, in some respects, a proxy war against Iran because of the Houthis. So the region's very, very worried. I wouldn't go as far to say they're cheering Israel on, but, you know, what they're saying in public and what they're saying in private can be very different. Benjamin Netanyahu believes that he is changing it for good, and that he's doing something historic in the state of Israel. And he has, let's be frank, so far militarily, the Israelis have had an awful lot of success in Iran. with very little consequence. You know, they've had no jet shot down, for example. There have been deaths here in Israel, but the ratio of number of deaths compared to the number of missiles fired, you know, is relatively small. He's getting no pressure internally from the public here to stop the fighting. And so I think he will be encouraged to continue. And now he's had a massive diplomatic success by bringing the US president on side. And from what we understand, the US president 8-9 days ago was not inclined to get involved in this, but has decided otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Benjamin Netanyahu, it's also about not just that he's wanted to do this for 30 years, but legacy and how he's perceived. And he, in many ways, felt it was sort of a message from God that he had to do this, a part of building his own legacy, but also political survival. Because, as you say, this is a deeply divided society. While they have rallied behind him, just as the Iranians have come together and don't want to see bombardment over the skies of Tehran, people who have been frustrated, who have been demonstrating against Benjamin Netanyahu for not just the last 20 months, but even before that, who are angry about the situation with the hostages, angry that the war in Gaza rages on, are now saying, well, they think that he has potentially done the right thing.
20 months or so ago, Benjamin Netanyahu was the Prime Minister of Israel on the day of its worst ever terror attack, one of its darkest days in the country's history. Politically, you know, he was staring down a very dark tunnel. He has managed to stay in power in all those months, despite huge international pressure, despite arrests for war crimes being issued against him, despite huge amount of domestic pressure. I mean, there's been times over the last 20 months when you've had, you know, more than 500,000 people on the streets of Israel calling for Netanyahu to go. He is still in power. This is about legacy. Not just Iran, but Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Iran. It is about his legacy. It is about putting him eventually, as he would like to see it, the greatest leader in Israel's history. The person who brought, finally, security to the people of Israel. He's not there yet, but he is starting to reshape his image through these kind of actions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the big question, if we go back to where we began, is will he really and truly be able to provide security for this society? Because Donald Trump warned the Iranians, don't retaliate, don't make a move. And of course, within about an hour and a half of him making that statement, we saw a barrage of ballistic missiles. And I think one of the biggest concerns that Israelis have had over the course of the last week or so is this thing needs to wrap up quickly, because we don't want this to turn into a war of attrition where every other day people are rushing into bunkers. They were also, and just another point, Ali, running quite low on interceptors. That became quite a big question mark around Israel.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can't speak for all Israelis, but if you're Israeli, you know, 8 or 9 days ago, your country has gone to war with Iran to remove an existential threat, the existential threat, really, to the very survival of this country. So Israelis rallied around the flag. They've endured a tough 8 or 9 days, broken night's sleep, nights spent in bunkers almost every night. Now that Trump has taken the action as he did last night, there might soon come a point where Israelis go, enough now, have you not achieved what you need to achieve? Let us now live our lives in more peace.
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 minute, Ali, because we're looking at some images that have come in the aftermath of some the ballistic missile strikes that Iran launched on Israel. And we understand this is from central as well as northern Israel, which is where the alerts were coming in from. Of course, we got an alert here in Jerusalem, but northern Israel, central Israel, over the course of the last few days has been hit quite hard. Haifa has been hit, and as has Tel Aviv. So this nation on high alert. You can see some of the damage done in those images.
Yeah, I've been to many of the impact strikes over the last few days, and the damage is extensive. I mean, do not underestimate the damage a ballistic missile can do, not just at the direct site of impact, but the blast wave that it gives off will blow out windows, blow off roof tiles, literally tip cars over for a pretty big radius, 50, 100-meter radius around. Now, one of the reasons that the death toll in Israel has been relatively low is because of safe rooms. Not every house has a safe room, although modern houses, it's absolutely part of the permissions you must get is to have what's called a mamad, a safe room in your house. But people they know where their bunkers are, so they go to them, and that helps save lives here. Also, the alarm system is incredibly sophisticated, and people obey it, and that helps keeps the death toll very low, despite what you're watching here, which is massive destruction.
Yeah, and it's that sort of sophisticated alert system that Iran doesn't have. In fact, many Iranians were talking about not knowing exactly when they should move, although the Israelis have said that they've sent them alerts, or there have been phone calls, automated phone calls, very much out of the Lebanon playbook, where they were telling them to get out.
Yeah, I should say as well, it is worth noting, that alarm system does not exist for Palestinians in the West Bank, for example. They don't have shelters, and there haven't been any missile strikes there. The falling debris has fallen there. Occasionally, actually, I say that, I think a missile did land quite close to Hebron the other day. The same goes for the Bedouin community in Israel as well. They often make the point that they don't have shelters, they don't have access to shelters. So that is always a problem. But yeah, the system here, the home front command system here, is incredibly sophisticated, developed, of course, over many, many years of conflict, but it is trusted, it is obeyed, and that does save lives. I was actually at a strike point the other day where a missile went directly into a safe room, and it did kill people in the safe room, but they say that as long as it doesn't literally hit you directly in that particular room that you're in, your chances of survival are very good indeed.
Yeah, and many people question, the number of the number of ballistic missiles that have come Israel's way. Why is it that the death toll isn't higher? And it's exactly that point, that people follow the sort of requirements and the rules that have been set out for them, and they get these alerts and stay underground, and that's why we have seen injuries. We saw a hospital hit the other day. Also, schools have been told, and other public places, people have been told, stay indoors, go into your bunkers, because, Ali, they do expect more ballistic missiles coming Israel's way.
Look, it's 5 to 9 on Sunday morning. This is the first day of the working week. And I know you're watching these pictures, but behind us, Yauda, are some of the main roads in central Jerusalem near the Old City, and I can see 3 or 4 cars, and that's it. At this time, on a normal Sunday morning, it'll be busy traffic, but people are staying at home. They're not going to work. They're not venturing very far from their homes, and they're staying there because of the risk that is still being posed by Iranian missiles coming in.
Yeah, very much so. And this country, this nation, as well as this region, is currently now on high alert. And the images you're looking at right now are from a barrage of ballistic missiles that came Israel's way in the last 45 minutes or an hour or so. We, of course, are following all the developments here from the ground. We've got our correspondents across the region. We'll be getting reaction from them. So do stay with us, but we are going to leave you with these images for now. We'll be back in the next few minutes. Bring in our US correspondent Mark Stone, who joins me now from Washington. Mark, we spoke just moments after Donald Trump put out that Truth Social statement saying that the United States had launched what he described as a successful operation to take out Iran's nuclear sites. And now it's late in the night where you are, but people are waking up here in the region to this news and essentially waiting to see now how Iran responds. Donald Trump has made it very clear that he does not expect them to retaliate.
He's made it clear that they should not retaliate, and clearly behind the scenes he has a good degree of confidence that they won't, because remember, there is a domestic political calculation that he is making here, because many around him and many in his coalition, his Make America Great Again coalition, are vehemently against America getting in any way involved in what they see as Israel's war, not their war. And so what he's trying to do and what he hopes he has done with this overnight strike is one massive game-changing strike which just draws a line under everything. That's his hope, that he's done two things, two objectives overnight. One, to take out Iran's nuclear program once and for all, stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. And two, that he is betting that Iran's capability to strike back is diminished to such an extent that they cannot cause any sort of mass casualty event either in Israel or against American assets anywhere in the region. Those are two big bets. First of all, there is no guarantee that these strikes will actually have ended Iran's nuclear program. They may have set it back, maybe many years. But for many years, experts have said you cannot entirely remove it. And we've seen already today some satellite imagery released by Maxar Technologies that was taken yesterday, which shows that the Fordo nuclear plant, the one that was hit with all those bunker busters, yesterday, before the bunker busters hit, there were 16 trucks, unusual vehicle movement, it's been described as, potentially moving some of the nuclear equipment to other locations. So that's the first challenge. Has he actually managed to achieve what he sought out to, which was to remove Iran's nuclear program? You know, that old phrase, time will tell, it really will. And then this gamble that Iran is incapable of attacking any American assets in the region. Well, we just don't know, but there are 40,000 American troops dotted around the Middle East. The way that the best case scenario is that he's removed the nuclear program and then that the moderates within the Iranian regime sort of see the light and decide, okay, fine, we're going to change course here. We've played this badly strategically over many years, and we're going to change course. That's the best case scenario. If he manages to achieve that, well, then maybe Netanyahu's right. Maybe this is a game-changing moment for the region. The worst case scenario is that Iran manages, even if it just manages one strike against an American military base and kills American soldiers, well, then the whole thing, it really does spiral. In terms of reaction from the Iranians, we've not had much, but we have had a statement from the Iranian foreign minister, who, remember, just yesterday, Friday, was in Geneva talking to Europeans, including Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Those discussions, there was no breakthrough, but they were still talking. But clearly, Donald, that moment in Geneva, I think, was a moment where Donald Trump saw that there was no obvious path to diplomacy, and he decided to go with the strike, which is remarkable because it was only on Friday that he said he was willing to give diplomacy up to 2 weeks. Anyway, the foreign minister for Iran has released a statement. I'll read it to you. He says, the United States, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, has committed a grave violation of the UN Charter, the international law, and the Non-Proliferation Treaty by attacking Iran's peaceful nuclear installations. Goes on to say, the events this morning are outrageous and will have everlasting consequences. Each and every member of the UN must be alarmed over this extremely dangerous, lawless, and criminal behavior. And it goes on to say, in accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate response in self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interests, and people. That's a statement from the Iranian foreign minister. I've been in touch over the last hour with Iranian officials at the United Nations up in New York. They have a mission up there. They've released a lengthy statement which is along the same lines as what the foreign minister said. But you know, the gist from the Iranian official I was speaking to is that they really do not know. This is the letter from the Iranians in New York. The inference is the same as the foreign minister. But the gist from my conversation with an Iranian official is that all bets are off, and they really, you know, they don't know where this will go next at that level in New York. They don't know how the supreme leader will respond to this.
I'm just going to bring in Ashley Perry, who's a former senior advisor to the Israeli government. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us here on the program. So Israel and the region have woken up to this news that Donald Trump has launched this attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. Just your reaction.
Well, first of all, I think this is a great day for global security. We are talking about the greatest threat to global stability. We're talking about a regime that not just called for death to Israel, death to the US, death to Britain, death to the West, but was actually creating the means to do it. They've said many times, death to all these countries is not a slogan, it's a policy. And they were moving rapidly. It was really 1 minute to midnight before they were capable of having an actual nuclear weapon, which would have been able to not just target Israel, all of Europe, including the UK, and working towards being able to also target the US in the future with some sort of satellite launch vehicles that basically would be able to target any inch surface area in the whole world. And that is not something that anyone in the international community could countenance. So as the Chancellor of Germany said the other day, Israel is doing the dirty work of the world.
This must be the same intelligence as in Iraq and Afghanistan.
As you just pointed out, with the Chancellor saying Israel is doing the dirty work of the rest of the world, we've seen the United States now say that they have finished it off by targeting these nuclear facilities. But the big question is, what does the day after look like? Has it really been finished off? And does this spill into a wider regional conflict?
Well, certainly we hope not, but the ball is certainly in the Iranian court. Israel has never been against peace, has never been against negotiations. There was a feeling that negotiations weren't going anywhere because of the Iranian belief that they had supreme leverage with their hurtling towards a nuclear weapon. Now, hopefully that has been relieved from them, and hopefully they're going to go back to the negotiating table as soon as possible and really sign a reasonable agreement that allows them some sort of nuclear civilian technology, but certainly not the weapons-grade uranium that they've already created.
Both Israel and US.
And basically ensures that they don't get that nuclear weapon that they have sought for decades.
How about no one has it?
Yeah, actually, I know you say it's 1 minute to midnight, but we've seen so many multiple reports saying that there was a disparity between Israeli intelligence and US intelligence. And Tulsi Gabbard has come out in the last few days trying to clarify what she said in March when she said that Iran is not close to weaponizing its program. I spoke to the IAEA this week and said while Iran wasn't meeting its obligations, they didn't believe that they were close to weaponizing their program. So do you believe that perhaps for Benjamin Netanyahu, while strategically the Israeli officials say this was a good time, for him it was also about political survival?
No, absolutely not. We know around the world there is no nuclear civilian program that enriches uranium above 5%. The Iranians had reached almost 90%, which is weapons-grade material. Most around the world understood that. Even the IAEA has confirmed that. And let's not forget, President Trump and other members of the American administration basically went against what Tulsi said a few months ago. And there was really an understanding in capitals around the world. That's what led to this sort of barrage of negotiations and the fear and the threat that, okay, we can argue whether they're 1 minute to midnight or 2 minutes to midnight. Either way, they're on the cusp of a nuclear weapon and the ability to send it across the world.
And I guess we go back to the concern then, because I just want to show our viewers the images from central and northern Israel this morning. Those ballistic missiles coming in from Iran continue. We've seen extensive amounts of damage, while the death toll here in Israel hasn't been high because people are following the rules and they are going down to the bunkers once the sirens blare. There is also no guarantee that this isn't going to turn into some kind of war of attrition where we see these scenes every few days here in Israel. And of course, Israel responding by launching strikes on Iranians. And while Israel continues to say they're not targeting civilians, we have seen up to 700 Iranians killed over the course of the last week.
Well, simply the cost of inaction was far greater. I myself in the safe room, as millions of Israelis are, these were built to save lives. If we didn't have them, the cost in Israeli lives would be in the thousands. Iran launched 30 missiles just a couple of hours ago, and that's basically been the story for the last week. Israelis would be killed in the thousands, maybe even the tens of thousands, if we didn't take these precautionary measures. But the Israeli public is solidly behind this action, whether you agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu or not as a political figure. The opposition leaders are all behind the Israeli government, because they understand that this is an existential threat. When Iran says death to Israel, they say again and again, this is not a slogan, this is policy. We saw it on October 7th. That was just the first round in this Iranian plan for the annihilation of the Jewish state. We found all sorts of records. We even took out last night the Iranian connecting factor from the Revolutionary Guards to Hamas, supporting them, funding them, ensuring that what they did, their massacre on October 7th, was only supposed to be the first round in the eventual destruction of the state of Israel. So Israelis understand that, and they're prepared for the days to come, and they're prepared for more and more barrages of missiles, and we will run to our safe rooms, but we are solidly behind the Israeli leadership because we understand without these attacks, our existence, our survival simply would be in the balance.
And Ashley, there are reports also coming in that perhaps the Iranians had moved many of the materials, the centrifuges, out of these facilities, especially Fordow. Do you have any information around that?
I don't think anyone does, except for, thankfully, Israeli intelligence, and I'm sure US intelligence as well. This war will go on as long as the Iranians don't come back to the negotiating table in a serious and diligent manner. So until that time, Israel will continue to target what it needs to target, as has been shown for the last, 8 or 9 days. Israeli intelligence knows where everything is, where every figure is, where every centrifuge is. So I have no doubt if the job wasn't done today, it will certainly be done in the coming days.
Ashley Perry, thank you very much for joining us here on the
Let's
program.
see how the other UN countries like UK responds to this.
I'm just going to bring in our political correspondent, Amanda Akas, because Amanda, I understand the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has now made a statement. Just bring us up to date.
Yes, he has in the last few moments. Let me read it to you. He said, Iran's nuclear program is a grave threat to international security. Iran can never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and the US has taken action to alleviate that threat. The situation in the Middle East remains volatile, and stability in the region is a priority. We call on Iran to return to the negotiating table and reach a diplomatic solution to end this crisis. So that's a very diplomatic statement, clearly, from the Prime Minister, who has been calling throughout this crisis for de-escalation, for a diplomatic solution. We've seen David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, flying between Washington and Geneva, trying to hold talks with other Europeans and his Iranian counterparts to bring about some kind of negotiated diplomatic solution to bring an end to the Iranian nuclear program. Clearly, the UK government was hoping that Donald Trump's talks of a 2-week pause window to wait for such a solution to be found. The UK had been pinning its hopes on that, but that clearly hasn't happened. Now, Keir Starmer, obviously also a very close ally of Donald Trump, has invested a lot of political capital building a close relationship with the American president, not at all critical of this action, reiterating the UK's concerns about Iran's nuclear program as a grave threat to international security. We do understand, however, that the UK has not been involved in these strikes operationally, no military assets involved and no use either. That would suggest that the UK military base at Diego Garcia, which the US does operate from, but needs the UK permission to do so. That seems not to be the case. It looks like the US bombers, we understand, were heading towards the US base in Guam, but that is still nothing has been confirmed in terms of the operational military situation. From that perspective, we've heard nothing.
Well, we're getting reaction after the US carried out attacks on 3 nuclear sites in Iran overnight. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has warned that the US attacks will have devastating consequences, and Tehran reserves all options to retaliate. Speaking in the last hour, he demanded an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, describing the US attacks as an unforgivable violation of international law. He also said he was due to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow tomorrow.
Well, I have been in touch with Tehran, of course. I still do not have exact information about the level of damages but I don't think it matters how much damages have been made. Attacking a nuclear facility by itself is an unforgivable violation of international law and should be condemned. Yesterday, as I said, I had discussion and talks with a number of foreign ministers of the region. Almost all of them are very much concerned and interested to play a role to end this aggression by Israel, of course. They were worried about a possible attack by the United States, but yesterday we were all talking about how to stop the Israeli aggression. Well, of course, the door for diplomacy should be always keep open, but this is not the case right now. My country has been under attack, under aggression, and we have to respond based on our legitimate right of self-defense. And we will do that as long as needed and necessary.